So you want to buy a property that already has tenants living in it. Should you be nervous? Stay tuned for my answer. So you're thinking about buying a property with tenants in it and you're getting nervous. I know many newer investors really do get anxious about the prospect of dealing with that tenant after the purchase is made. And the way it goes with real estate, when you buy the property, you are also buying and taking over the existing leases that come with it. Now, in this video, I want to talk about the concerns, legit concerns, many of you watching may have with buying a property that already has a tenant in it, and the things that you could do through smart due diligence to minimize that risk so that you don't miss out on the opportunities for great investments. The first concern that I hear is, I don't want to inherit somebody else's headaches. Now, you may think the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, and you don't want to take on somebody else's bad decision or poor judgment with tenant screening. I get it. But one way to mitigate that is when you're looking at the property, reviewing the property, take some time to actually engage with the tenants. Sometimes the seller may try to block you in doing that because they're nervous about what the tenant would say. But I would kind of casually ask them about, their experience. Do they have any lingering maintenance concerns, or what was the last thing that was fixed? And watch out for kind of comments like, "Oh, I hope the new landlord doesn't plan on raising the rent." Those little signals will really tell you how difficult it will be if raising the rent was in your plans, how difficult it would be to do that with those tenants. The second common concern I hear is not being able to get enough good information on the tenant's financials or the financials of the deal before buying the property. Now, most people are clear that they want to do a detailed or in-depth physical inspection, and they know about putting together a repair budget and looking at deferred maintenance and capital expenditures. But what about trying to assess how well the tenants are actually paying their rent so far and how that is keeping up with the ongoing operating expenses? My advice to kind of solve that concern is, one, try to size up the seller in terms of their prowess to give you good financials up front, because that's really a limiting factor. If it's a mom and pop organization and they've been writing their numbers on in a notebook for 20 years, they're not going to be able to snap their fingers and give you button-up financial statements. It's just not going to happen. So that really puts pressure on you to really validate realistic assumptions, seeking out professionals, property managers that may have better proxies than, averages for that specific neighborhood. And then if you're getting a loan, really being clear with them up front about what are the key financials you're going to need to close on the loan, because you'll want to tell the seller up front that expectation so that you can work together to get that information. Because after all, a rental property, you're buying income streams, right? So it is a function of the physical condition of the property, but it's really important for you to understand what have a realistic view of the potential income from the property. And that really is solved by due diligence and probably more conservative assumptions. The number 3 concern that I hear about is concern about how expensive or hard it will be to remove bad tenants. I know you watch the news like I do, and from all the talk about moratoriums and rule changes in various cities and towns across the country, as a landlord, you may be nervous about that. What are your options? Are your options just to wait till they stop paying rent for 6 months or, tear up the place? You do have things that you can do on the front end to help kind of manage that fear. One, after you've kind of assessed the tenants, did your due diligence, if you determine these are indeed bad tenants, you can request or put in the contract that you want the property delivered vacant. In that case, it's very easy, especially with month-to-month leases, and you're pushing the work to get rid of the tenants on the seller or the owner, and you will get the property vacant and you can start from scratch. If, in fact, after you do your due diligence, you don't really have clear evidence that they're bad tenants, maybe they're just paying below market rate, but they're not generally bad tenants, what you can do, as long as they're on a month-to-month lease, is to just make sure the seller has complied with all the regulations in terms of rental license and inspections. You want to be clear on that up front, so that if you have to take legal action soon after closing, that you had your ducks in a row. Otherwise, you can kind of keep the tenants, even if they're paying below market rent for a short term, just to build up cash flow, and then make plans to transition after that. So there's nothing wrong with kind of saying these tenants, even though you're inheriting them, you plan them to be short-term tenants, because they may not be it may not be financially feasible for either of you to continue that relationship long-term. The last concern that I'll talk about is just managing that transition. So you're handed the keys, and then the seller waves goodbye and good luck. Now what are you going to do? You've inherited these leases and these tenants. The best advice I can give is to ensure that the seller communicates that transition to the tenants and getting a copy of that. So there's nothing in the base contract that says that, but it's a good practice to not only know that they quote unquote told the tenants to contact you, but have them kind of submit a formal change of ownership letter that gives your contact information, so that when you follow up on top of that, they'll know who you are and they'll be expecting a call from you. And so that means that you need to have a communication plan in place as well. I recommend that you really think about your options in terms of, are these tenants that you want to stay for 6 months? Or are these tenants that can ride the wave and be in place while you make any upgrades to increase the value of your property? I think the more transparent and upfront you can be, again, assuming these are not the bad tenants that you flagged in your due diligence, they just may not be tenants that, are going to go with you doubling the rent after you invest all this money in upgrading the unit. You can terminate leases on a much more amicable situation through communication. So that's really the theme with that point. Before I wrap up, I do want to make the point that this interviewing or due diligence on the tenants is somewhat of a two-way street. While you're getting intel to firm up your assumptions about rent and repairs and whether you want to make this a long-term relationship with them or not, they're kind of sizing you up as well. Are you going to be an upgrade from their current landlord? Is the transition going to be bumpy? They're trying to figure that out. They may relay information even back to the seller about what you asked when you were walking through the property. So you definitely want to handle that conversation with care, and be careful not to promise any kind of grand plans that may be in your head but not come to fruition because the numbers don't work. So they may listen to that and remember that you said that after you bought the property. So you want to manage that kind of interaction with care, but it can be very important to help you be comfortable with moving forward with your investment. Now, if you want more information about some of the challenges to buying a tenant-occupied property, you want to watch the video I did a while back about some of the pros and cons of buying a property with an existing tenant or vacant. Thanks again for staying tuned to this video. Don't forget to leave me comments below or questions. Always try to get right back with you. And as always, happy investing.